It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at Group B: Mexico, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Jamaica. Here we go! It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada, Series 28. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor, and today we are looking at Group B for the Copa America 2024 tournament. This group is made up of Mexico, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Jamaica.
Nice emphasis on the names there, Connor. We're currently focused on the 2024 Euro Cup and Copa America. Both of these played in June 2024. So we're producing this group and team series, and we'll be producing a player series for each. So there are two parts to this media cast.
In part one, we give a summary of each team's World and Regional Cup histories. We'll also take a bit of a closer look at their recent history and form, including how they qualified for the tournament, for those that had to do so.
Right, and we'll look into the teams. We'll look at the teams in part two in comparison to each other in the groups. That'll entail looking at their rankings, head-to-head history, and their chances of success. And then we'll end with a discussion of their prospects and our predictions.
Okay, well, let's get into it.
I want to point out first that I have a Jamaica shirt somewhere in my collection, but I can't find it, and I'm sad about that. I tend to favor the weaker teams, so although I'm trying not to have a bias here, I would probably wear the Jamaica shirt over the Mexico shirt, but at least this one's relevant. You, on the other hand?
I'm not relevant. I'm staying totally neutral. We'll leave it at that.
You're in the completely wrong region. Okay, let's jump into part one, looking at the broader history of the teams. And starting with Mexico. So Mexico is a second-tier team at the world level and one of the two top teams, if inconsistently so, in their region. They have, since 1986, both passed the group stage and fallen at the next step of the World Cup, a barrier that's become something of a curse for them. The only exceptions were in 1990 when they were disqualified from the World Cup, and 2022 where they narrowly failed to advance from the group stage. Their second-tier ranking at the world level is also supported by their results in Confederation Cups and their many Copa America appearances, which average out to quarterfinal finishes. By these measures, they had a peak in the 1990s with second-place finishes in both of those tournaments, as well as 3 Gold Cups in a row in their region. Despite the odd lapse in their regional tournament, they're undoubtedly a top-tier team there, challenged only by the USA. While never winning 3 in a row as they did in the 1990s, they have won every second cup of the biannual tournament since 2009.
So 2002 represents a break in their consistent pattern of passing the World Cup group stage. But
hang on, Connor, that's 2022.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
Yes, the most recent cup, but falling at the next level. However, they were so close to passing that it almost represents the same thing and really shouldn't be interpreted as a sign of weakness. There is a slight shudder of weakness in the years they did not win the Gold Cup. It's not that they failed to win, but they failed to reach the final in 2013 and 2017. In truth, though, they are strong enough to send a B team, as they did in these years, and remain competitive. In 2019, they won the title without several of their strongest players. The lack of competition in their region is the reason they value competitions like the Copa America. Although after consistently participating until 2016, CONCACAF has disallowed them from joining, likely because they were sending their top players there rather than to the Gold Cup.
All right. Well, that is the broad and recent history, but the most recent history is the last few tournaments. So we'll take a look at how they've done. They, as you said, were part of a lot of Copa Americas there up until 2016, but not part of the Copa America in 2021. So we move on to the Gold Cup, their most recent regional tournament that was in 2023.
Yeah, so qualification came through the 2022-23 Nations League A group, where they twice beat Suriname and actually twice tied Jamaica. They'll finish first ahead of them for automatic qualification. In the cup, they beat Honduras, then Haiti, but somehow their B team lost to Qatar, despite utterly dominating. They then comfortably beat Costa Rica and Jamaica to reach the final, but needed a goal at 88 minutes to overcome Panama and win their 12th regional title.
Yeah, interesting to take a look at their games with Jamaica there. They tied them both in qualifying, but then handily beat them in the semi-final there.
Yeah, 3-0.
Yeah, I say that because they meet Jamaica in this group. Okay, let's move on to the next, the World Cup 2022 finals. I think we're a bit out of order there, but let's forge on.
Yeah, so in the 2022 World Cup, they tied Poland 0-0 in their opener. They then lost to eventual champions Argentina 2-0 before beating Saudi Arabia in a must-win game. They finished tied with Poland with an identical 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss records. But Poland had a goal difference of 0 and Mexico of -1. So they couldn't quite turn goal difference in their favor to advance and ended up going out in 3rd place.
Yeah, and what happened there was Saudi Arabia actually scored a late goal against them, so they were very close to passing. However, I believe they would have lost on yellow card count to Poland if it came down to that. Nevertheless, as you said, kind of in the recent summary, it's really not that far from passing the group stage and being knocked out at the round of 16 as they usually are.
Yeah, 4 points that they got is often enough to advance.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to look at their Nations League performance. We'll take a look at the 2022-23, which you looked at the qualifying stage there, so we're more interested in the finals here.
Yeah, that's right. They topped that group ahead of Jamaica and Suriname. In the semifinal, they met Mexico.
Met USA.
Correct, sorry. Not meeting them in the final as often is the case. So they had to settle for 3rd place match, which they won against Panama 1-0. That's the same score by which they beat Panama in the Gold Cup final.
That's right. So actually they met Panama there in the final of the 2023 Gold Cup a little bit later. So actually Panama reaching the final ahead of the USA a couple of times there. Let's look at the Nations League 2023-24.
Yeah, so this one was set up a little bit differently. It started with the quarterfinal matchup against Honduras. Mexico lost 2-0 in Honduras and then won 2-0 at home, which forced a penalty shootout, which they won. But some drama as they actually scored in the 11th minute of stoppage time to force that penalty shootout. So quite a narrow quarterfinal victory.
Yeah, holy smokes. Losing at home to Honduras, that would have been hell to pay in Mexico if that had happened.
Absolutely. And that's a Honduras team that, not at the peak of their strength.
Yeah.
They then met who else but Panama in the semifinals, which they beat them again. That set up a final with the United States, and the United States was victorious, beating Mexico 2-0.
Yeah, they seem to exchange wins quite evenly, USA and Mexico.
That's right.
Okay, and well, we would look at the 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign, but that has not begun for the CONCACAF region yet. Actually, I think a couple of preliminaries have been played, but the main round begins in June of 2024, so nothing to look at there. We'll just kind of review their qualification for this cup, even though we've looked at it already, but maybe take us through it again.
Yeah, qualifying was through the Nations League, and so it was that matchup against Honduras where they got by the skin of their teeth. That was the match that sent the winner into qualifying for this tournament. So you're right, they really would have been held to pay if they didn't qualify automatically. Had they lost, they would have had a secondary opportunity, but Mexico relieved to advance to the Copa America at the first time of asking.
Yeah, and they're usually a bit stronger than that in this region. Anyway, that was an interesting look at Mexico. We now move on to Ecuador and begin with a kind of a broader history of Ecuador. So Ecuador entered their first World Cup in 1962, but it took until 2002, 40 years, to reach their first tournament. Since then, however, they've reached 4 of the 6 tournaments, passing the group stage in 2006 for their best finish. They did pass the group stage there, but they exited in the round of 16. Otherwise, in their World Cup appearances, they have fallen at the group stage. Their record, though, is much weaker in Copa America play. They were usually knocked out at the group stage throughout their history, except for 2 periods that do not align with their recent World Cup successes. That was a peak in the mid-90s, which saw them finish 4th as host in 1993, and then 2 tournaments later passing the group stage in 1997. Similarly, they passed the group stage in 2 out of 3 recent tournaments. That was in 2016 and then 2021. What success they do enjoy is sometimes put down to their strong home form. At home, they play at such a high altitude that visitors struggle. And while that's true, a close examination shows it to be a bit too simplistic because the pattern doesn't always hold. For example, they do win some away games. So it's more accurate to simply see Ecuador as an inconsistent team, especially in the difference between World Cup and Copa America performances.
Right. Their differing fortunes in World Cup versus Copa America play seems to come into line in 2016. Where they proved the competitive middling team that they have shown in World Cup play. But a ghastly World Cup campaign in 2018 argued they were, in fact, the weak team in the region that their poor Copa America record shows. More recent matters or campaigns only confuse the issue further. Reaching the quarterfinal of the 2021 Copa America was not a strong performance as they finished 4th in a group stage of 5, but reaching the 2022 World Cup and performing well there, despite not passing the group stage, was yet another instance of World Cup play being stronger than the regional strength would predict.
Right. Well, let's take a bit of a closer look at their recent history by going over their recent tournaments. And you alluded to this Copa America 2021 performance. The result not as good as the performance.
Yeah, they're in a 5-team group stage where 4 teams advance. They lost their opener to Colombia, and then they tied their next 3 games. So I guess only one loss is positive, but failing to win is a negative. The draws were against Venezuela, Peru, and Brazil, so especially that last result is impressive. So they did go through as the 4th out of 5 teams, narrowly taking the last qualifying spot. But in the quarterfinal stage, that set them up with mighty Argentina, and they were handily beaten, Argentina winning 3-0.
Yeah, and again, interesting to look at the competition with Venezuela because they meet them here. And that was a COVID-ravaged Venezuela who they only managed to tie. So not a great result there, or even against Peru.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, the next one is their World Cup 2022 qualifying campaign. Perhaps we'll focus more on the table at the bottom more than the actual results here.
Yeah, other than to note, as you alluded to, they were. It wasn't just down to home form. They only won 5 of their 9 home games, but also won 2 on the road. So a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, after 18 games, they finished with 7 victories, 5 defeats, or 5 draws, and 6 defeats. That was good enough for 4th place, which was the final automatic qualifying spot. They were 2 points behind Argentina in 3rd, and then within 3 points of Peru and Colombia behind them. So they were a part of a very competitive middle of the table, but they came out the right side of that and qualified automatically for the World Cup.
Yeah, 2 points actually behind Uruguay rather than Argentina.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
Argentina and Brazil far ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you know this, Connor, but in the current World Cup qualification, it'll be the seven top teams that will advance automatically, and the eighth earning a playoff, an intercontinental playoff. Oh, do you know it may be 6 plus 1 or 7 plus 1? Anyway, it is more.
Yeah, and that's more than half the teams from the 10-team region.
Yeah. Yeah, so Ecuador will have a good chance of qualifying there. Anyway, we dragged off topic a little bit. Sorry about that. Let's see how they did in the finals.
Yeah, so at the World Cup, they started with an impressive 2-0 win over Qatar. That was the opening game of the tournament, and a match that Qatar really put a lot of hopes on. But Ecuador actually played very well in that game.
Mm-hmm.
They then tied the Netherlands 1-1. So they looked to be in fabulous shape going into that match, their final match against Senegal. But a defeat there to Senegal and just the way results fell saw Ecuador go out in third place with 4 points, 2 points behind Senegal and 3 points behind Netherlands.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling they deserved a little better there. They only lost 2-1 to Senegal. It was a good performance.
It was, beating the host, tying a European giant, and then, that draw against Senegal, which was a very close game. I do feel a bit bad for them. I think they played better than their third place finish kind of deserved.
Yeah, definitely. Nevertheless, that was the end of the road for them, and so we move on to their next tournament, and that is World Cup qualifying for the 2026 edition.
Yeah, so they have played 6 games, the first 6 out of 18. They lost their opener to Argentina, but only 1-0 on the road. And they built on that positive result, winning 3 and tying 2 of the next 5 games. So they're actually currently in 6th place, but decent results so far with winning half their games.
Yeah, once again, their record looks a little bit, or the result looks a little bit disappointing given the performance there. Again, a tie with Venezuela, an interesting detail.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see how that plays out. They're a third of the way through. And the last thing we would look at is Copa America qualifying, but of course the South American teams qualify automatically for this tournament. So that brings us to the end of Ecuador.
That's right.
So we move on to Venezuela and begin with a look at their broader history. So Venezuela was the last South American team to enter into qualification, joining the World Cup in 1966 and Copa America in 1967. They've never qualified for a World Cup and in fact have only come close once. That was in 2014. They were similarly weak in Copa America play, never passing the group stage until hosting in 2007. In fact, so weak were they that they hadn't won a single game in a Copa America tournament from 1966 to 2004. However, they have done well since, passing the group stage in 4 of the last 6 editions. They had never passed the group stage of a Copa America prior to 2007. And while that and the good 2014 World Cup campaign suggests recent improvement, they have finished last of 10 in 2 World Cup qualifying campaigns since. Thus, they seem increasingly divergent in their World Cup play versus their better Copa America play.
Yeah, divergent, kind of like Ecuador is, but flip, where Ecuador was better in the World Cup and Venezuela doing better in Copa America. So
yeah, which makes for an interesting pairing here.
Absolutely. All right. They are in a relatively strong period with their best ever World Cup qualification run in 2014 and passing the group stage in 2 of the last 3 Copa Americas. However, last place finishes in 2018 and 2022 World Cup campaigns were poor, and their Copa America record caught up. or really fell down to that level in 2021 when they only needed to finish fourth in the 5-team group to advance, but failed to do so. In fairness, COVID had ravaged their teams. They may earn a pass for that performance if their good Copa America form returns going forward.
Okay, and let's look at the recent form. That Copa America 2021, again, the team having struggling with COVID, and probably Venezuela is a little less able to cope with it than, say, Brazil, who would have the bench strength to overcome it.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of looked at this group because they were in Ecuador's group. They did lose heavily to Brazil in their opener, but then put in valiant performances to tie both Colombia and Ecuador before losing 1-0 to Peru. So their 2 points was a point behind Ecuador, who got the final qualifying spot to advance to the knockout stage.
Yeah, that also sets up a good battle between them here. Let's look at the World Cup 2022 finals. We'll just give the result for this one.
Yeah, and not much to say because they were not participating.
Yeah, and finished last of 10 in the big qualifying campaign there. We'll see if they've done any better in this 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign.
Yeah, they lost their opener, but have gone undefeated in the next 5. So actually a similar situation as Ecuador have. That includes home wins over Paraguay and Chile, and a couple draws, including away in Brazil. So that has put them in 4th out of 10 so far. So it's actually quite a strong start, already winning as many games as they did in the previous qualifying campaign.
Yeah, wow, that's great. And how dreamy a tie in Brazil, hey?
Amazing result.
Right. Again, just like Ecuador, they didn't need to qualify for this cup. Just the CONCACAF teams went through a qualification process. South American teams qualifying automatically. And so we move on to Jamaica. And instead of giving Jamaica's regional record there, I put the Copa America record. You maybe just want to take us through that? They don't have a lot of experience.
No, they've competed in 2 in 2015 and 2016. Both times they were knocked out in the first round. I believe those were 12-team Copa Americas with 3 groups of 4. So yeah, not advancing, but respected enough to get invited to a pretty prestigious tournament.
Yeah, in 2015, the 2016 Copa Centenario, I think it was 16 teams, and is kind of like the Copa America we're heading into. They're kind of a mix of kind of a mix of the Americas.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's take a look at Jamaica's kind of longer history. So Jamaica is one of the strongest teams in their local Caribbean region. However, that locality is generally weaker than the Central American locality, and both are weaker than Mexico and USA in the North American area. Jamaica and other Caribbean teams do rise up to challenge at the regional level in their good years. In World Cup play, this means reaching the final round of qualifying, and Jamaica has challenged at that level in 1998, where they finished 3rd to qualify for their only World Cup. Otherwise, they do well to reach that final round and finish in the bottom half of the table if they do. In regional play, Jamaica did not challenge in the CONCACAF Championship era from 1963 to 1989. They did well to qualify for the tournament, which they did only twice, and appeared weak once there. Attendance at the Gold Cup, though, improved from 1991 to 2017, when qualification became dependent on their performance in the local Caribbean Cup. Despite some inconsistency in that cup, they usually did well enough to reach the Gold Cup and usually passed the group stage once there. Their strongest period was 2015 to 2019, where they finished 2nd twice and reached the semi-final in 2019. Qualification for the Gold Cup now depends on their CONCACAF Nations League performance, and they have managed so far to stay in League A. which is comprised of the top 12 teams in the region.
Jamaica is coming off a good period, which saw them finish second in the Gold Cups in 2015 and 2017. They fell back to a semi-final finish in 2019, and then back to their average, a quarter-final finish in 2021. This does, though, place them among the top 8 teams in the region, and they've maintained that in World Cup qualification by reaching the final round, the final 8, in 2022, though they didn't make the final 6 in 2018. Despite starting in League B of the CONCACAF Nations League, they quickly earned promotion to League A and have thus far maintained their position. That has been aided by a scraping of birth records, which revealed some talented English players were eligible to play for them. Though not at the second tier of the region for much of their history, they are recently enjoying some top-tier results.
Right, and we'll take a look at the most recent of those results, and I won't make the same mistake as I did for Mexico. Let's start with the World Cup in 2022.
Yeah, so they didn't qualify. They finished 6th out of 8 in the round-robin final qualification round.
Yeah, and if I recall, they were actually fairly weak for most of that and kind of picked it up at the end. Is that what you remember?
That's my recall. They weren't really ever close to challenging.
Yeah.
But.
Okay, but let's now go to the World Cup in 2020. The Gold Cup in 2023. They have been doing better at the regional tournaments recently.
They have. So qualification was through Nations League A. They only won one match, beating Suriname at home, tying them on the road. But as we actually already saw, they picked up very credible draws, both home and away, in Mexico. So they finished with 6 points, and that was comfortably in second place, which is an automatic qualifying spot to the Gold Cup. Once there, they tied Jamaica tied the United States in their opener, so another really good result, before hammering both Trinidad and Tobago and St. Kitts and Nevis to advance in second place, though tied on point with the U.S. They beat Guatemala in the quarterfinal before facing Mexico, and Mexico won that game 3-0. So another semifinal achievement for Jamaica, their 4th in 5 tournaments.
Yeah, semi-final suggesting a top 4 in the region, which is probably where they hope to be. We looked at the World Cup finals in 2026. Let's look at their Nations League in 2022 and 2023.
Yeah, so as we saw, they tied Mexico twice and finished ahead of Suriname. So while second place was good enough to qualify for the Gold Cup, it wasn't good enough to reach the Final Four tournament for the Nations League.
Right. Okay, let's see if they did any better in the 2023-24 Nations League, which, as you've said, was a bit of a different structure.
Yeah. So Jamaica was in started in a 6-team group stage, but they played 4 games, 2 at home and 2 away. They won 3 of those 4. The only blemish with the draw was Haiti, and they topped their group ahead of Honduras. Based on that, they advanced to a quarterfinal where they met Canada. And despite losing at home, they staged a remarkable come-from-behind victory in Canada to advance on away goals to the CONCACAF Nations League final. This is the Final Four.
I have to object to you using a positive descriptor there.
Yes, I'm trying to take the Jamaican side. It was crushing for Canada to blow that lead. But a great result for Jamaica, especially given Canada's home form and recent play in World Cup qualifying.
Mm-hmm.
In the Final Four of the Nations League, they tied the United States, but lost 3-1 after extra time. So a good performance again before beating Panama in the 3rd place match.
Yeah, so taking 3rd place again, finishing in the top 4 there. Where they want to be, and that quarterfinal actually acted as qualifying for this cup, so we'll just mention that here.
Yeah, and by virtue of beating Canada, they qualified directly for this tournament without having to go through a secondary playoff round.
That's right. Canada had to go to a further playoff round to reach the Copa America here. And finally, we would look at the 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign like we are for the South American teams. However, the CONCACAF has not really gotten underway, so nothing to look at so far. And that brings us to the end of the kind of part one, the history. So now we'll look into part two, where we compare the teams more directly, beginning with their pots and rankings.
So Mexico was placed in pot one with Argentina, Brazil, and the United States. It wasn't purely on FIFA rankings because Uruguay is actually ahead of them, so I'm not entirely sure how it worked. But anyways, Mexico was a seeded pot one team, though the weakest of the pot one teams. The pot two team was Ecuador. The pot three team was Venezuela, ranked again like Ecuador, 3rd out of 4 in their pot. And then Jamaica was the final team, the pot 4 team, once again ranked 3rd out of 4 in their pot. So I guess what we can say is that all these teams come from the bottom half of their pots in terms of strength.
Yeah, that's right. And I am a bit baffled too. I think they just wanted to separate those 4 teams in the group stage, the 2 strongest teams in CONCACAF and in South America. But as you say, there are stronger teams than both Mexico and the US in pot 2.
Yeah.
Okay, that sheds a little bit of light. But let's look at the FIFA rankings a bit more directly and see what they're saying.
Yeah, so in FIFA rankings, Mexico is first of the 4 teams, not first in the world. 15th in the world for Mexico, in fact, though 25th in ELO, so their ELO ranking a little bit lower. Next is Ecuador, who are 32nd in FIFA, but actually 15th in ELO.
I can't help but think that's a mistake there. I'm just looking up their... no, they are. They are.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so the
Sorry.
ELOs we generally find a bit more reliable, as takes a bit more of a long-term view with less fluctuations. So yeah, an interesting flip of the script there. In pot 3, we have Venezuela, who are 50th in FIFA, but 33rd in ELO. So again, we're again seeing a big discrepancy in the ranking systems. And then finally, we have Jamaica, who are 55th in FIFA and 57th in ELO.
Wow, that'll be a bit of a talking point there. In general, which do you agree with more?
You know, this time I probably agree a little bit more with the FIFA rankings than ELO. And just to summarize, Mexico 15th, Ecuador 32nd, Venezuela 50, Jamaica 55. But ELO kind of turns a lot of that on its head.
Yeah, Ecuador 15, Mexico 25, Venezuela not far behind at 33, and Jamaica far behind at 57.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's move on to the head-to-head records here, beginning with Mexico versus Ecuador.
Yeah, they've met 6 times in competitive play, Mexico winning 5 and Ecuador just once.
Yes, and most of their meetings have been in the Copa America. They met in the 1993 Copa America semi-final there. Mexico won that. It was Ecuador's only win was in the 2015 Copa America, the most recent one there.
Yeah, most recent meeting.
Yes. Okay, next we have Mexico versus Venezuela.
Yeah, these teams have played half as many times, and it's 2 wins for Mexico, 1 draw between the 2 sides.
Right, and adding some interest to the group there, Venezuela and Mexico tied in the 2016 Copa Centenario, their most recent meeting.
Yeah.
Let's look at Mexico, Jamaica. Of course, they'll have met far more often.
Yeah, many times. Mexico clearly dominant, though. They have 20 wins. They've tied 5 times, and 3 wins go to Jamaica.
Yeah, well, not to de-emphasize that general dominance, they did tie, as we saw twice in the 2023 CONCACAF Nations League, so that'll give Jamaica a little bit of belief.
For sure.
Probably, yeah, their most important meeting was in the 2015 Gold Cup final, Mexico taking that one. All right, Ecuador versus Venezuela.
Ecuador have won 11 times. That's more than Venezuela's 6 wins, and they have tied 4.
Yes, that's right. And over their most recent meetings, 2022 World Cup qualifying and the recent qualifying where they tied, it's 1-1-1. So looking fairly close in recent times, at least. Okay, on to Ecuador versus Jamaica.
Yeah, they haven't met before, so this will be a first meeting for those 2 teams.
And finally, Venezuela versus Jamaica.
And they've met just once. Venezuela were victorious in that match.
Yeah, that also was the 2016 Copa Centenario. All right, those are the head-to-head. Now let's take a look at the odds. What we have here, Connor, is the odds of the teams advancing from the groups.
Yeah, so that's
from the group, yeah.
Finishing in the top 2 positions. So Mexico is given a 75% chance. Ecuador 71. Venezuela is further behind at 38% and Jamaica 17%.
Okay, so actually we seem to have some conflicting evidence to begin the discussion here. I mean, certainly the FIFA and ELO rankings, some things would suggest that Venezuela and Jamaica are not so far behind, whereas these odds suggest Mexico and Ecuador much more likely to win. Do you want to start off the discussion?
Yeah, I mean, ELO has Ecuador ahead, FIFA has Mexico, and they're both given similar odds of advancing, though ELO puts Venezuela as a lot more competitive, perhaps, than FIFA and the odds suggest. I probably don't see it as clear-cut. I think Ecuador and Venezuela are potentially closer, and part of that is looking at their Venezuela and Ecuador's kind of differing form in Copa America play, which I think gives Venezuela a bit of a boost. I think Mexico, are probably the strongest team in this group, and they'll be playing, more similar to a home match in the United States, both geographically and I'm sure in terms of fan base. But I do see it as a pretty competitive group overall. And Jamaica, just a quick word on them. In recent matches, they've tied Mexico, United States, beaten Canada. They've done very well in the region and have done exceedingly well in the last 5 Gold Cups. So they're not a team to be written off so easily.
Yeah, that's a good broad overview. I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, for one thing, even though this is called the Copa America, it's not really a Copa America. It's kind of halfway between a Copa America and a World Cup in a sense that, as you say, it's being played in the USA, so Mexico will have a big fan base there. Jamaica probably will do a little bit better. Because of that. Any thoughts on that? Do you think the location makes a big difference?
I guess for all these teams, it is technically a neutral ground. Yeah, I think, Ecuador particularly draws a little bit more on their home form than some teams. And I think for Mexico, they always get such a good following that the stadiums will feel like a home game for them, probably wherever they go.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing too is sorry, I lost my thread there. Mexico is the favorites by most accounts, other than the ELO ratings. Do you think they are open to challenge here? I mean, they look like they're probably the strongest team in the group, but do you think they will drop points?
I definitely think they'll drop points in this group. Yeah, I mean, Mexico are consistently strong in Gold Cup play, and they actually are decently strong in Copa America play as well when they've been there. But the caliber of opposition, even if Ecuador and Venezuela are not the strongest of teams in South America, the caliber of competition is a bit higher than it has been. Mexico did not do particularly well in the World Cup qualifying final 8 in that group stage. They kind of struggled. They obviously didn't pass the World Cup group stage, which they're used to doing. Would you go as far to say Mexico's in a bit of a slump, perhaps?
Yeah, I do, but I wouldn't say that. I think Mexico is consistent. I don't think they're stronger or weaker than usual, but I think I picked up the thread of what I was going to say, which is very significant. Is Mexico going to send their top players to this World Cup? They played the World Cup in 2022 in December. They played the Gold Cup, although I don't think they sent all of their best players in 2023. And now they have this tournament in the summer of 2024. Players may be clamoring for a break. Will they send their A team?
I think they will. And I think historically Mexico has really valued these Copa Americas. They've really valued the chance to compete against South American sides, probably more so than they have the North American thing, which, we mentioned it was a problem. So I think Mexico will send their best squad, but Mexico does have such a huge squad that whenever they put out a team, unless they're playing in an elite competition, you don't always see their best players playing together.
Yeah. I mean, they have a Gold Cup in 2025. I imagine they really will send a B team to that one.
Yeah.
I agree with you too. I think the higher quality of opposition is something they've always valued. In fact, I suspect that they've been barred from playing in Copa America because they were sending their stronger teams to that competition and sending a B team to the Gold Cup. And I think that's why CONCACAF disallowed their members from joining the Copa America. This is a higher profile tournament too, being played in the USA. So I think this will be a bit more important to them than the Gold Cup, which really shouldn't be taking place every 2 years.
Yeah.
But the same question of Jamaica, and Jamaica, they've got these players from England, kind of Premier League players from England, but I think I'm not questioning their loyalty. I think they've been showing up quite a bit. But, when it's a kind of a World Cup qualifying game against someone like Suriname, I'm not sure that these players always come. Will they come to this tournament?
Again, I think they will. I think Jamaica, they're not a team that regularly gets to the World Cup. So this is probably the best competition that they'll be playing in. They've done well in Gold Cups. They have sent some pretty strong teams there. So I think all teams will take this fairly well. I think, Jamaica, it's a chance to play in full stadiums and have a bit of kind of publicity for their team, a bit of prestige. So I think they'll send their best. And I do think Jamaica is capable of getting points off any one of these teams. I mean, they have done it against Mexico recently.
Yeah.
And against Ecuador and Venezuela, I don't think they're out of their depth. Again, these are not the strongest teams. It's probably a slightly favorable draw because there were stronger teams in both pots that they could have been pulled against. So it's an opportunity for them. I don't think Jamaica will advance, but I think they can get points.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, they could have pulled Uruguay, and they got Ecuador, notoriously weak team in Copa America play. But again, this is more of a world tournament where Ecuador does a bit better. Can you just give me a second? I have to cough.
Yeah, well, I'll pick it up looking at the two South American teams between Ecuador and Venezuela. And I view them closer than the odds suggest, where they give Ecuador 71% chance advancing and Venezuela 38%. I think the last Copa America, a little bit hard on Venezuela because they were hit by COVID so hard. But they started their World Cup qualifying campaign quite well. They are in a bit of a strong period, and I think that's not over yet. They've done well in this tournament in recent years. So I think Venezuela, I see them as actually quite competitive with Ecuador, despite obviously Ecuador getting to the most recent World Cup and Venezuela not.
Yeah, I do too. I haven't said much about the individual teams other than Mexico. I think the ranking of Ecuador 15th in the world by ELO is absolutely outrageous. We usually like ELO because they don't have crazy stuff like that. But well, just a quick opinion from you on that. I think it's outrageous.
It's too high, I would say. I mean, it's not all about players and club affiliations, but they have some good players on good clubs. But when you look at some of the teams up there in the ELO rankings, they just don't have the squad depth or probably the squad quality.
Well, what have they done that Mexico hasn't done to reach that level? I mean, both of them were close to passing the group stage in the World Cup, but neither of them did. I don't see anything really that Ecuador has done to deserve such a high ranking.
Yeah, I mean, they're usually kind of mid-table in their region. So to
Yeah,
be 15th in the world in ELO, I think is again too high. And they didn't make the last 16 of the World Cup, which maybe you can make an argument then. So yeah,
yeah.
I see it as too high, and I see it as closer to Venezuela than than they're given kind of credit for.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's really interesting that Venezuela and Ecuador have exactly the same record in the World Cup qualifying, even though Venezuela is in fourth place because of it, and Ecuador's in sixth place. Um, Venezuela did tie Brazil, though, whereas Ecuador really haven't played any of the top teams. I guess they beat Uruguay 2-1 to their credit. But yeah, I'm really not seeing much to justify their 15th place in ELO. I'll stop harping on that now. The other factor for Ecuador is their regional form, which we've said puts them much closer to Venezuela than we think. And you've said most of what I want to say about Venezuela, but they're looking quite good recently if we give them a pass on that 2021 Copa America because of the COVID. I guess the last place finishes in qualifying weren't very good, but they seem to be a different team in Copa America over the last 15 years.
Yeah, and I mean Ecuador would view themselves as a stronger team than Venezuela based on really their World Cup form and probably their overall play. But yeah, when you look at Copa America play, there's not much to justify it. They a single point separated them in the last Copa America at the bottom of the pile, and they tied in that head-to-head match. So I think they're two fairly evenly matched teams.
Yeah, I think so too. And I haven't spoken directly about Jamaica. You've said things that are more positive. I disagree with this 17%. Almost as much as I disagree with Ecuador. I think Jamaica could finish second in this group if they do send their best. And I want to say that our discussion is based on the assumption that the teams will send their best. If Mexico doesn't send their best team, it won't affect them as much as if Jamaica doesn't send their best team. But going on the basis that they send their best team, I think Jamaica's really in the thick of it here and could well finish second.
Yeah, they've taken points off Canada and the US and Mexico, like we've said. I think they're competitive if you consider, the South American teams maybe on a little bit of a par with Panama or some of the other teams in CONCACAF region. Jamaica does well against them. So I think the draw was favorable for them, and I think it's an opportunity. And they do have some good players, and I really hope that they show well as they've been showing in their Gold Cup play. Not, however, the Jamaica team that kind of really struggled to gain any traction in World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, I guess any listeners that disagree with us maybe shouting that you can't really compare CONCACAF success with South America. They're a bit apples and oranges. The South American CONMEBOL being much stronger. What would you say to those people?
I guess this is a tournament to watch too. I guess be proven true or not. I think one thing that benefits teams like Venezuela and Ecuador is that they play more competitive matches against good teams. So they may not get a lot of wins, but they're still playing, stronger teams, whereas Jamaica does spend a lot of time playing against other Caribbean nations, and a little bit less so against the big teams. So I guess Jamaica probably has a smaller sample size of playing, really strong competition, but they've done well when they're there. So I think that alone is enough to give them, a bit of optimism.
Yeah, and if they were a bit out of their league in 2015 and 2016, I think the quality of players on the squad has improved quite a lot, and I think they'll be more capable of taking on stronger teams than they were, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have anything to add, or is it time for me to pin you down on what your predictions will be for this group?
I am, I guess, ready to be pinned down. I'll try and give it to you as straight as I can. I do think Mexico will win the group, but I think they'll drop points along the way. I think Ecuador have a higher potential than Venezuela overall and are a stronger team, but I'm actually going to go with Venezuela, maybe because I'm rooting for them a little bit because they're in a strong period. But I'd like to see them do well here. So I'm going to go Venezuela second, Ecuador third, and Jamaica last, but not pointless. I think Jamaica will at least pick up at least one draw, if not maybe a second.
All right. Well, I do think this is one of the most interesting groups. I think Mexico is not unassailable, so I wouldn't be surprised if points were taken off of them by someone. But like you, I kind of agree that they will be the first tier teams. As you said, they kind of relish the Copa America and that level of play. So again, I'm kind of going on the basis that they send their best. I'm actually going to be bold and pick Jamaica for second. While I do agree that the South America region is stronger and it is a bit apples and oranges, Jamaica has never gone to a tournament with the kind of players that they have now. And I think they have a good chance for second, and that's kind of assuming that Ecuador will perform a bit more like the Copa America Ecuador than the World Ecuador. But really, I see it as quite close among these three teams. I'm a bit loath to say Venezuela will be last as well. So I kind of think all of those have a really good bid for second place. But if I'm going to be if I have to be pinned down, I'm going to say Mexico, Jamaica, and while I do appreciate what you said about Venezuela, I think Ecuador is a bit more used to this kind of venue and a bit better at the world level. So I'll say Ecuador third and Venezuela fourth. I'm not putting any money on this, though.
Yeah. You mentioned it would be close between the kind of the bottom three teams, but I really think it will be close among all four.
Yeah,
If Jamaica steals a point against Mexico, which is very possible. That's the fourth pot team taking down the first pot team. That could really open the door. And I think we both discounted Ecuador. I still think they're a very good team. They could well win this group. We're kind of considering some other factors, but Ecuador, I think, could well win the group, but I'll stick with what I've said, and maybe a bit of a surprise to have Venezuela advance.
Yeah, when I first looked at this group and especially looked at the odds, I kind of thought, oh, okay, two strong teams, two weaker teams. We're going to see that in a couple of the other groups. But yeah, once we got into the discussion here, I find this to be a very interesting group. And yeah, I didn't mean to kind of suggest Mexico and then everyone else, because they could be drawn into the fray for sure.
Yeah. I agree. This will be a fascinating group to follow.
Yeah, good. Well, nice talking to you about it, and hopefully we'll have as good a discussion with the other groups, although I now see this as the closest one.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be a fun tournament, and hoping for some surprises in this group, because I think it's possible.
All right, well then we'll see you for Group C.
All right, I'll see you next time.
We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this media cast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.